there, you're watching World News Program with me, Madame Zian, live from Algiers. To the headlines. Zionist occupation forces continue to claim lives in Gaza amid evacuation order that the UN considers forced displacement, while UNRWA states that there's no room for humanitarian organizations to carry out their mission. Algeria holds intensive talks at Antalya Forum, key discussions focused on Palestine, Libya, and boosting ties with international partners. And in developments in Sudan, violent attacks by the Rapid Support Forces on displacement camps in Darfur leave scores of dead, and the UN warns of the dangers of the war, which enters its third year amid the increasing number of refugees fleeing to Europe. Ahead of US-Iran nuclear talks, Tehran reaffirms its commitment to giving diplomacy a chance during negotiations with Washington amid escalating tensions between the two countries over Iran's nuclear file. Hello and welcome back to the details of our program. First, in our news file, the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza announced on Friday that 26 Palestinians were martyred, 106 others injured, all of whom were taken to hospitals in the Gaza Strip over the past 24 hours. In a statement, the ministry reported that the total number of the casualties since the resumption of the aggression on the Strip has risen to 1,542 martyrs and 3,940 injured. The ministry also noted that the death toll from the Zionist aggression on Gaza since October 7, 2023 has climbed to 50,912 martyrs. And on Friday morning, the Zionist occupation issued new evacuation orders for residents of several areas in Gaza City in the central part of the Strip. According to the Palestinian news agency, the occupation forces issued evacuation orders for Palestinians in part of the neighborhoods of Zaytoun, Shuja'iyyah and Tufah east of Gaza City, demanding immediate departure from their homes and relocation to the western areas of the city. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights confirmed that Israeli evacuation orders in the Gaza Strip constitute displacement orders. The Commission emphasized that Israeli eviction orders in Gaza have forcibly relocated Palestinians to increasingly shrinking areas, noting that the displaced have almost no access to life-saving services.
The increase in issuance of evacuation orders by Israeli forces, which are in effect deportation orders, has resulted in the forced displacement of Palestinians in Gaza into ever-shrinking areas where they have limited access to basic services, including water, food and shelter, and where they remain vulnerable to attack. The nature and scope of the evacuation orders raise serious concerns that Israel intends to permanently evacuate the civilian population from these areas. The permanent displacement of civilians within occupied territory amounts to forcible transfer, a grave breach of the Fourth Geneva Convention, and a crime against humanity under the Rome Statute.
Still in the Palestinian file, the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Palestine, Francesca Albanese, called on the world's countries to impose sanctions on the Zionist occupation and compel it to halt its war on Gaza. Albanese said that the Zionist occupation continues to commit crimes of genocide and use food as a weapon, stressing that no people are more vulnerable to famine than the residents of the Gaza Strip.
The world's countries must stop this genocide and impose sanctions on Israel, which continues to reap the lives of Palestinians. It has killed more than 50,000 people, most of them women and children. It is also directly and covertly using food as a weapon of war, which violates all international conventions. Therefore, all countries of the world must confront these crimes and put an end to them as soon as possible.
The World Health Organization confirmed that 75% of the UN missions are prevented from entering Gaza due to the ongoing blockade and bombardment of the Strip. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said Thursday at a press conference in Geneva that the comprehensive blockade imposed by Israel on the Gaza Strip since March the 2nd has prevented the entry of all food and medicine, leaving Palestinian families suffering from hunger and malnutrition and hindering their access to clean water, shelter, and adequate health care, leading to an increased risk of disease and death.
In the past week, 75% of UN missions within Gaza have been denied or impeded. This blockade is leaving families hungry, malnourished, without clean water, shelter, and adequate health care, and increasing the risk of disease and death.
The humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip continues to deteriorate as the Zionist entity maintains its blockade on all crossings in and out of the territory. Water resources are now scarcer than ever, following the occupation forces' targeting of distribution infrastructure and the direct bombardment of civilians, leaving many unable to access clean water. Usama Ayadi has the report.
Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza have lost their main source of clean water in the past week after supplies from the water utility were cut off. The Zionist entity continues its blockade on all crossings, banning humanitarian aid from reaching those in need.
Since morning, I have been waiting for water. There are no stations and no trucks coming. There is no water. Since morning, there is no water to come. The crossings are closed. God willing, the war will end safely and peacefully.
Many Palestinians now have to walk sometimes for miles to get a small water fill amidst the occupation's shelling and ground offensive. Bombardment and targeting of all facilities damaged the pipeline that operated by state-owned Mikorot and left all Palestinians suffer thirst to death. Mikorot's pipeline had been supplying 70% of Gaza City's water since the destruction of most of its wells during the war.
I walk long distances to get water. I am the only one who walks around to get water from my family. I get tired. I am old. I am not young to walk around every day to get water. God help people.
Water for drinking, cooking and washing has increasingly become a luxury for Gaza residents following the resumption of hostilities.
Now we cannot secure drinking water. There used to be a schedule. The municipality would open the water lines for us every Sunday. Now there is no water at all. Today the water was supposed to arrive, but it didn't come at all. We are suffering in a terrible way.
Most of Gaza's 2.3 million people have become internally displaced by the war, with many making daily trips on foot to fill plastic containers with water from the few wells that are still functioning in remoter areas, and even these do not guarantee clean supplies.
And in a statement to the Algerian international channel, Al-24 News, UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini confirmed that Israeli evacuation orders in the Gaza Strip are ongoing, noting that there is no room for humanitarian organizations to carry out their work. Let's take a listen.
Since the breakdown of the ceasefire, military intervention has escalated. The crossings have been completely shut down. People are constantly asked to be on the move. There are evacuation orders all the time. There is no food available, no medicine available. So right now, there is almost no space for humanitarian organization to operate. We as UNRWA can keep some services, but food and medicine has been depleted. So the future of the humanitarian response depends on the future, if yes or not, a ceasefire can be put back in place.
Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf discussed the dire situation in Gaza with UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini amid the ongoing Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people on the sidelines of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum in Turkey. The two diplomats addressed the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, especially in light of the continued Israeli policy of restricting UNRWA's activities in particular and humanitarian relief efforts in general. The Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, also met with Karim Ahmed Khan, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, to discuss the steps taken by the court to prosecute Israeli occupation officials. According to a statement from the Algerian Foreign Ministry, the meeting took place on the sidelines of the 4th edition of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum in Turkey. During their encounter, they discussed the legal actions taken by the ICC to hold the Israeli officials accountable for committing war crimes and crimes against humanity in the Gaza Strip. Also on Friday, Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf attended the opening ceremony of the 4th Antalya Diplomacy Forum in Turkey, inaugurated by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan under the theme Restoring Diplomacy in a Divided World. The forum features a series of workshops addressing major global issues with participation from government officials, international organizations, academics, and media figures. The Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Affairs Ahmed Attaf discussed with his Croatian counterpart Gordan Grilic Radman the state of friendship and cooperation relations between the two countries. A statement from the Algerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs explained that the two ministers, ahead of the start of the 4th Antalya Diplomacy Forum in Turkey, explored ways to give greater momentum to bilateral relations. And also, Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Affairs, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, discussed with his Chadian counterpart, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Abderrahman Koulamala, ways to strengthen coordination between the two countries in light of bilateral commitments. A statement from the Algerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs said the discussions held on the sidelines of their participation in the Antalya Diplomacy Forum were an opportunity to assess bilateral cooperation and discuss prospects for strengthening within the framework of the bilateral commitments both sides are working to realize. Algerian Minister of State and Foreign Affairs Ahmed Attaf exchanged views with an analysis with the head of the United Nations support mission in Libya, Hana Tete, regarding the latest developments in the Libyan situation. According to a statement from the Algerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Attaf and Tete met on the sidelines of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum to discuss prospects for ending the division in Libya under the auspices of the United Nations. An Algerian Minister of Interior, Brahim Merad, met with his Italian counterpart, Matteo Piantedosi, to explore ways to enhance bilateral cooperation in key strategic areas. According to a statement from the Algerian Ministry of Interior, the meeting held on the sidelines of the Quadrilateral Summit on Irregular Migration in Naples reaffirmed the strength of Algerian-Italian ties and reviewed progress on joint projects. The two sides praised the alignment of their countries' positions and the strong growing partnership rooted in mutual trust and friendship. And Secretary of State at the Algerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in charge of the national community abroad, Soufiane Chayeb, met with the ambassador of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Abdullah Nasser al-Busayri, to discuss ways of enhancing joint consular cooperation. A statement from the Algerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs explained that during the ambassador's visit to the ministry, both sides reviewed the current state of bilateral cooperation and discussed ways to improve joint work in consular affairs and exchange expertise, particularly in the digitalization and improvement of consular services to better serve the community's interests. The Polisario Front has voiced regret over recent remarks by the U.S. Undersecretary of State on Western Sahara, calling them a violation of international legitimacy. In a statement after its permanent secretariat meeting, the front said the U.S. position contradicts UN resolutions and international court rulings, reaffirming its rejection of any solution outside the framework of international law and the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination and independence.
We salute the international march demanding the release of Sahrawi political prisoners in Moroccan prisons and the wide national and international support it has received, a response that pushed the Moroccan occupier into hysteria, mobilizing its agents to harass and provoke march participants in France. We call on all Sahrawis to remain vigilant against the policies of the Moroccan occupation and to preserve unity and cohesion under the leadership of their sole legitimate representative, the Polisario Front.
And the U.S. has called for effective measures to strengthen economic stability in Libya and create conditions for greater economic opportunities. Jeremy Burnt, chargé d'affaires at the U.S. Embassy in Libya, said in a post on X that during a meeting with the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister of the Government of the National Unity, Ibrahim Beiba, he emphasized the importance of the United Nations support mission in Libya and back in Libyan efforts aimed at overcoming political divisions. And 30 civilians, including women and children, were killed on Friday in an attack by the Rapid Support Forces on the Zamzam IDP camp in North Darfur, Sudan. According to reports from local resistance committee members, the attack, which took place in the morning, included intense shelling and gunfire targeting the camp from the south and east. The exact death toll could not be confirmed due to communication disruptions. "15 Sudanese were killed and over 25 others were wounded in a bombing by the Rapid Support Forces on the Abu Shouk IDP camp in Al Fasher, North Darfur. The Abu Shouk emergency room confirmed in a statement that the Rapid Support Forces used 120mm and 82mm artillery, shelling the homes of displaced persons, leading to the deaths of 15, mostly women and children. This attack is considered one of the heaviest bombardments on the Abu Shouk camp. And over 1,000 Sudanese refugees reached or tried to reach Europe in early 2025 as aid cuts fuel growing desperation. UNHCR says arrivals rose 38% compared to last year, with over 930 intercepted at sea and returned to Libya. 12 million have been displaced by Sudan's war in what the UN calls the world's worst aid crisis.
Over 70,000 Sudanese refugees have arrived in Uganda, and others continue to attempt dangerous crossings to reach Europe. While the number of Sudanese arriving in Europe remains low, arrivals increased by 38% year on year in the first 2 months of 2025. We fear many more will have little choice but to join them. Nearly 13 million people have fled their homes to date, with almost 4 million crossing into neighboring countries. Displacement continued to grow in the second year of the conflict, with over 1 million people fleeing Sudan.
The World Food Programme's Emergency Office for the Sudan crisis warned that tens of thousands could die in the worst third year if humanitarian agencies are denied access to affected populations. WFP Emergency Coordinator for Sudan, Sean Hawks, highlighted the growing famine risk facing half the country's population, including nearly 5 million malnourished children and mothers, amid severe aid obstruction.
In terms of hunger, this is the only place in the world where famine is currently confirmed, and only the third famine to be classified this century. The scale of what is unfolding in Sudan threatens to dwarf much of what we've seen over previous decades. Across the country, nearly 25 million people, or half the population, face extreme hunger. Nearly 5 million children and mothers are acutely malnourished. This is a man-made crisis. Man-made because it is driven by conflict, not by drought or floods or earthquakes, and man-made because of the obstruction of access to humanitarian assistance by parties to the conflict.
And Iran said on Friday that it is given nuclear talks with the United States a genuine chance during Saturday's negotiations in Oman. In a post on X, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson emphasized that Tehran will not prejudge the outcome, noting that Washington values Iran's decision to engage despite ongoing tensions.
In earnest and with candid vigilance, we're giving diplomacy a genuine chance. U.S. should value this decision formed despite their prevailing confrontational hoopla. We do not prejudge, we do not predict. We intend to assess the other side's intent and resolve this Saturday. We shall reflect and respond accordingly.
And high-stakes nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran are unfolding in Oman amid escalating regional tensions. With the future of the nuclear and broader stability on the line, all eyes are on the outcome. Marwa Belawar breaks it all down for you.
Tensions between the United States and Iran have reached a critical point as both sides prepare for a new round of nuclear talks in Oman. After months of escalating rhetoric and threats, these negotiations could shape the region's security for years to come.
If these negotiations fail, obviously the Israelis will be pushing for some kind of a military, confrontation with Iran, and I think the Americans will follow suit as well in the event that Iran refuses to cooperate in a meaningful way. And that is precisely the threat of that, which has become much more serious now.
Tehran has downplayed the possibility of a quick deal, calling the proposed 2-month timeline unrealistic. Still, it's open to a temporary agreement reducing uranium enrichment in exchange for partial sanctions relief.
It was the biggest day in history.
But diplomacy is unfolding against a backdrop of military pressure. The U.S., under President Donald Trump, has deployed B-2 bombers to Diego Garcia hours after Iran imposed higher tariffs on American goods. Washington insists it will not allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons.
President Trump's been clear on that. Iran should not have a nuclear bomb, nuclear weapons. We very much hope the president is focused on doing that peacefully. That's very much what we would prefer as well.
Iran has responded with warnings, threatening to expel nuclear inspectors and relocate sensitive activities to secret sites. Yet, President Masoud Pezeshkian has offered a diplomatic signal, denying any ambitions for nuclear arms and suggesting possible U.S. investment in Iran. As both sides sit down in Muscat, the outcome remains uncertain. With global security on the line, the talks could mark a turning point or a deeper descent into crisis.
And China raised tariffs on U.S. imports to 125% on Friday in retaliation for U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to increase tariffs on Chinese goods to 145%, escalating the trade war and threatening global supply chains. The Chinese Ministry of Finance stated that the U.S. imposition of excessively high tariffs on China severely violates international trade rules and basic economic laws and constitutes bullying and unilateralism. And in a high-level meeting in Beijing, Chinese President Xi Jinping told Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez that China and the European Union must stand together to defend globalization and reject what he called unilateral bullying, referring to Washington amid ongoing trade tensions. The talks come as China and the U.S. remain locked in a tariff war. President Xi stressed that no one benefits from such conflicts and called for joint efforts to preserve global economic stability.
China and Europe should fulfill their international responsibilities, jointly uphold the trend of economic globalization and the international trade environment, and work together to oppose unilateral bullying. This is not only about safeguarding our legitimate rights and interests, but also about defending international fairness and justice and maintaining global rules and orders.
And the UN's International Trade Center warned today that tariffs and counter-tariffs could have a devastating impact on developing countries, even worse than cuts in foreign aid. ITC Executive Director Pamela Cook-Hamilton said tariffs risk wiping out the economic gains made by developing nations in recent years.
tariffs could have a much more not harmful impact than the removal of aid. The calculations that we currently had up to before the 90-day pause is that it would result in a fall by 2040 of 0.7% in overall global GDP. The implications of that are wide-ranging. The implications for developing countries as a whole is also going to be difficult. I think one of the areas that we also need to look at is how will it impact the fragmentation across the board, the geopolitical repositioning that is going to take place.
Russian President Vladimir Putin met in St. Petersburg with U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff for talks on a possible peace deal on Ukraine. The two also discussed a potential Trump-Putin meeting. Earlier, Izvestia published footage of Witkoff in St. Petersburg with Kirill Dmitriev, Putin's investment envoy. And talks reportedly included possible joint investments in the Arctic and Russian rare earth minerals. And lastly, a tourist helicopter crashed into the Hudson River in New York on Thursday evening, killing 6 people, including 3 children, as announced by Mayor Eric Adams. Local officials confirmed that the helicopter, which was used for sightseeing, crashed midair and fell into the river, resulting in the deaths of the pilot and a family of 5 Spanish tourists. Ladies and gentlemen, our program has come to an end. If you missed any part of it, our websites and platforms remain available around the clock. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.